She trapped me into fatherhood, fought me for custody, and nearly broke our family apart. Now, 14 years later, my son and I are building the life she never gave us. So, listen up. This is something I've been carrying around for years, and I finally need to say it out loud. I'm 28 now, but when I was 25, my life turned upside down in the worst way possible. Let me explain. It started with her. Let's call her Sarah. We'd been dating for 3 years, and everything seemed fine. One thing we both agreed on? No kids. I'd grown up as the oldest of 9 siblings, so trust me, I knew what raising kids meant. It wasn't for me. But Sarah had other plans. One day, we were having sex like normal. We always used the pull-out method because neither of us wanted kids. That's when things got weird. As I was about to, finish, she did something unexpected. She wrapped her legs around me tight and wouldn't let go. I tried to push her off, but she held on like a vice. We were practically wrestling. Finally, I managed to get free, and I asked her why she did it. She didn't answer. She just sat there staring at the floor with this strange smile on her face. Creepy, right? The next morning, I went out and bought Plan B, the morning after pill, but she refused to take it. I don't want to poison my body, she said. A few weeks later, she showed me a positive pregnancy test. Here's the kicker, she knew exactly what she was doing. She'd timed her ovulation and planned the whole thing. And here's the part that really bugs me. She brought up God all of a sudden. Like, 1 minute she's smoking weed, drinking alcohol, lying, stealing, and punching me in the face, yes, really, and the next minute she's all about religion. Her own mom even told her she'd had an abortion before. Suddenly, it was all about being pure and godly. Yeah, okay. When she told me she was pregnant, I suggested we terminate it. Again, no dice. It wouldn't sit well with God, she said. Meanwhile, she'd already done plenty of stuff that probably wouldn't sit well with God. Long story short, I became a dad whether I liked it or not. During the pregnancy, she acted like she couldn't do anything for herself. She made me cook, clean, run errands, you name it. After our son was born, things got worse. She claimed she had postpartum depression and refused to help with him. So guess who changed all the diapers, rocked him to sleep, fed him in the middle of the night, and basically raised him alone? Me. She stopped breastfeeding after 2 weeks because she wanted to keep smoking weed. After 2 years of this, I couldn't take it anymore. I left. Big mistake. She took me to court and told them I was an absent father, even though I'd been the only one taking care of our son. Because she wouldn't let me see him before the trial, they believed her. I ended up paying $1,400 a month in child support, which was almost half my income at the time. The ironic part? After winning the case, she dropped him off with me most of the week. Go figure. But wait, there's more. She spread rumors about me to our friends, saying I was gay, abusive, and dangerous. She drove past my house sometimes, called me names, tried to get restraining orders, and harassed every woman I dated. Worst of all, she badmouthed me to our son. She bribed him with gifts and money to spy on me, and if he didn't give her info or said he didn't know, she'd get mad at him. It broke my heart. Eventually, I gave up. I let her move to another state with our son just so I could have some peace. Now I'm what people call Disney dad. I only see him during summer vacation. He's almost 14 now, and I miss watching him grow up. Still, I love him more than anything, and I only want what's best for him. He's hinted that he wants to come live with me, but I don't want to force him away from his mom until he's ready. Looking back, I realize how naive I was. I thought Sarah would change over time, that love could fix her anger issues. Turns out, people don't change unless they want to. And I sure learned that lesson the hard way. Anyway, thanks for listening. It feels good to finally say all this out loud. So, last time I told you about how Sarah basically forced me into fatherhood, dragged me through court, and made my life hell for years. But that was just the beginning. Turns out, life doesn't stop throwing curveballs once you think you've hit rock bottom. Here's what happened next. Fast forward 2 years after she moved away with our son, Jake. Things were supposed to be simpler now. She'd taken him across state lines, leaving me as Disney dad, but at least I had some peace. Or so I thought. One day, out of nowhere, I get this text from her, Jake's failing school. No explanation, no context, just those 4 words. And then another one 5 minutes later, he needs help. Help? From me? The guy she spent years telling everyone, including Jake, that I'm abusive, gay, or whatever else suited her narrative? Yeah, right. Still, something in her tone felt different this time. Desperate even. So, against every instinct telling me to ignore it, I called her. She answered on the 3rd ring, sounding exhausted. Listen, she said, cutting straight to the chase, I can't handle him anymore. He's skipping classes, staying out late, refusing to listen to me. If he keeps this up, he'll flunk out completely. Pause. Deep breath. Then, almost casually, like it wasn't a bombshell, maybe it'd be better if he lived with you. Wait. What? Did I hear that right? After everything, the lies, the drama, the court battles, she wants me to take care of Jake? Part of me wanted to laugh in her face. Another part of me wanted to scream. But deep down, there was a tiny spark of hope. Could this actually work? Could I finally have a real shot at being the dad I always wanted to be? But before I could even process it, she dropped another bomb. There's more. Of course there was. His teacher reported him for drawing violent pictures in class. Like, really disturbing stuff. And now Child Protective Services is involved. CPS? Seriously? My stomach sank. This wasn't just about bad grades anymore. This was serious. If CPS decided Jake wasn't safe with her, and honestly, who could blame them? They might put him in foster care. Or worse, send him somewhere far away where neither of us could reach him. Either way, I knew I couldn't let that happen. So, I did what any sane person would do when their ex calls asking for help while CPS looms over their kid's future. I agreed to meet her halfway. Literally. She suggested we talk in person, somewhere neutral. We settled on a diner halfway between our states. It'd give us both time to hash things out without anyone getting too emotional, or dramatic, at home. The drive there gave me plenty of time to think. Was I ready for this? Really ready? Sure, I missed Jake like crazy, but taking full custody meant giving up my already fragile peace of mind. Plus, there was Sarah. Could I trust her not to screw this up somehow? Probably not. But I also knew one thing for sure: Jake deserved better than either of us had given him so far. When I walked into the diner, she was already sitting there, staring at her coffee like it held all the answers. She looked tired, older than I remembered. For the first time in years, I saw vulnerability in her eyes. No smirks, no accusations, just raw exhaustion. "Thanks for coming," she said quietly, not looking up. I sat down across from her, trying to keep my guard up. "What's going on?" And that's when she started talking. About Jake's behavior, about her struggles, about how she realized she wasn't cut out to be a single mom. About how much guilt she carried for forcing him on me in the first place. By the end of the conversation, I wasn't sure whether to believe her or run screaming in the opposite direction. One thing was clear though: whatever happened next, Jake's future hung in the balance. Now here's the twist: as we talked, I noticed something strange. Every few minutes, she'd glance nervously toward the window. At first, I didn't think much of it. But then I spotted someone outside, a man in a dark jacket, pacing back and forth near the parking lot. Something about him seemed off. Before I could point him out to Sarah, he disappeared around the corner. Turns out, that was only the beginning of a whole new chapter. A chapter filled with secrets, surprises, and decisions that will change everything. For me, for Sarah, and especially for Jake. Stay tuned. So, after that weird meeting with Sarah at the diner, things got even stranger. Like, full-on unpredictable territory. Let me explain. We were still sitting there, hashing out what to do about Jake, when she suddenly leaned forward and whispered, "There's something else." Her voice was low, almost like she didn't want anyone nearby to overhear. I raised an eyebrow, waiting for her to continue. "What now? Was this another bombshell?" It's his dad," she said finally, looking down at her coffee cup like it held all the answers. "His dad?" I repeated, confused. "What about him?" She hesitated, fidgeting with the napkin on the table. "You don't know this part because I never told you. But before we started dating, I was seeing someone else. A guy named Mark." "Okay, hold on. Backtrack. She had been seeing someone else? Before me? And why was this coming up now?" My mind raced as I tried to piece together what this meant. "Wait," I said slowly. "Are you saying?" "I think Mark might be Jake's real father," she blurted out, then quickly added, "but I'm not sure. I haven't told him yet." "Or Jake." I stared at her, completely speechless. Here I was, thinking I knew everything about how Jake came into my life, and now she drops this curveball? The whole time, there was a chance Jake wasn't even mine biologically? No wonder she'd been so desperate to trap me into fatherhood back then. Maybe she'd known this could happen someday. Before I could process any of it, she went on. "Look, I wouldn't have said anything if it weren't important. But lately, Jake's been asking questions. About his family, his roots. He wants answers, and I can't keep lying to him anymore." This was insane. On one hand, I couldn't blame her for wanting to come clean. Kids deserve to know the truth, right? On the other hand, this changed everything. If Mark really was Jake's biological father, did he even know about Jake? Would he want to step in now? And what about me? Did this mean I wasn't actually Jake's dad in the eyes of the law, or worse, in his own heart? As if reading my thoughts, Sarah added, "Whatever happens, you're still Jake's dad. To him, you always will be. You raised him, took care of him, loved him. That doesn't change just because of some DNA test." Her words hit me hard. She was right, of course. Whether or not I shared blood with Jake, I'd spent years being his dad. That bond wasn't going anywhere. Still, the idea of another man potentially stepping into the picture made me uneasy. What if Mark showed up and decided he wanted custody? Could I fight against him? Would I win? While I sat there processing all this, Sarah glanced toward the window again. "Remember that guy in the dark jacket from earlier?" "Yeah, he was back. Only this time, he wasn't pacing. He was standing directly outside, staring through the glass at us." Sarah tensed beside me. "Do you see that?" she whispered. "Yeah," I replied, keeping my voice calm despite the growing unease in my gut. "Who is he?" "I don't know," she admitted, glancing around nervously. "But I've seen him before. Around town. Watching me. Following me." Now I was officially freaked out. "Stalkers? Seriously?" First the CPS drama, then the revelation about Jake's possible biological father, and now this? My life felt like one long episode of Law and Order. SVU. Should we call the cops? I asked. No, she said quickly. Not yet. Let's just finish talking first. So we did. We talked about Jake, about Mark, about everything that had led us to this point. By the time we left the diner, the sun was setting, and the parking lot was mostly empty. As we walked to our cars, I kept glancing over my shoulder, half expecting the guy in the dark jacket to appear again. But he was gone. Fast forward a few days, and things only got crazier. Sarah called me late one night, panicking. Jake ran away, she said without preamble. He left a note saying he's coming to see you. My heart sank. Of course he would. After everything she'd told me, it made sense that he'd want to reach out to me. But running away? That was dangerous. Especially with whoever the hell was following her possibly still out there. I'll come get him, I said immediately. Tell me where he went. He didn't say exactly, she admitted. Just that he's taking a bus to your city. I don't know which one, though. Great. Just great. So now I had to play detective and track down my teenage son who might, or might not, be mine biologically, while also dealing with a potential stalker and an ex who seemed more lost than ever. The next morning, I drove to the nearest bus station, hoping against hope that Jake would show up. Hours passed, and just when I was starting to lose faith, I spotted him, a scrawny kid with headphones on, dragging a duffel bag behind him. When he saw me, his face lit up. Dad, he shouted, dropping the bag and running toward me. For a moment, I forgot about everything. The lies, the drama, the uncertainty. All that mattered was him. My boy. My Jake. And yeah, maybe biology didn't matter as much as I thought it did. Over the next few weeks, Jake stayed with me. We talked. A lot. About school, about Sarah, about Mark, about life. Slowly but surely, he opened up about how hard things had been living with her, how she'd been drinking more, losing her temper, neglecting him. It broke my heart to hear it, but it also reinforced why I needed to step up. For him. Meanwhile, I reached out to a lawyer to figure out my options regarding custody. Turns out, since I'd been listed as Jake's legal father for years, I had a strong case. Even if Mark turned out to be the biological father, it wouldn't automatically give him rights unless he proved he'd been actively involved in Jake's life. Which, based on what Sarah had told me, he hadn't. But here's the thing, none of this was easy. Every step forward brought new challenges. Sarah resisted letting go, claiming she couldn't afford to lose Jake. Mark eventually found out about Jake and demanded paternity tests. And the guy in the dark jacket? Yeah, he showed up again. At my house. Late one night. Knocking on my door like it was no big deal. When I opened it, he introduced himself as David, a private investigator hired by Sarah's mom. Apparently, she'd been worried about Sarah's mental state and wanted to make sure Jake was safe. Not exactly the stalker scenario I'd imagined, but still unsettling. Through it all, I learned one thing for certain. Being a parent isn't about perfection. It's about showing up, making mistakes, and trying again. Whether Jake was mine by blood or choice, I was committed to giving him the best life I could. Because at the end of the day, he was my kid. My responsibility. My family. And honestly, that was enough. So, after everything that went down, Jake showing up at my place, Sarah resisting letting go, Mark demanding paternity tests, and that whole stalker situation, I thought life might finally start settling down. But let me tell you, life has its own way of keeping you on your toes. First off, Jake stayed with me for a few months. It wasn't perfect, but it was. Okay. We figured out a routine. He'd wake up, grab breakfast, head to school, come home, do homework, play video games, and crash early. Normal kid stuff. The difference? He started opening up more. Telling me about his day, asking questions about growing up, even cracking jokes sometimes. That last part surprised me. I hadn't seen him laugh much during those 2 years before she moved away. One evening, we were sitting in the living room. He had his history textbook open, and I was scrolling through news headlines on my phone. Out of nowhere, he said, "Dad? Yeah?" I looked up. What if Mom's right? What if Mark really is my dad? His question hit me like a punch to the gut. I set my phone aside and focused on him. What makes you say that? He shrugged, staring at his book like it held all the answers. She talks about him sometimes. When she thinks I'm not listening. And now that he knows about me. I don't know. It feels weird. I sighed. Look, buddy, whether or not Mark's your biological dad doesn't change who you are. You're still the same person. Same likes, same dislikes, same everything. Got it? He nodded slowly, but I could tell it was weighing on him. Which made sense. Who wouldn't be confused in this situation? Meanwhile, the paternity test results came back. Turns out, Mark wasn't Jake's father. Relief washed over me when I saw the results. Not because I doubted my bond with Jake, that was never the issue, but because it meant one less complication in an already messy situation. Still, I knew I needed to break the news gently. The next morning, I sat Jake down at the kitchen table. "Hey, I got the results from the test," I said. He froze mid-bite of cereal. "And? It's negative. Mark's not your dad." For a second, he just stared at me. Then he grinned so wide it nearly split his face. "Seriously? That's awesome. Yeah, I chuckled. Means you're stuck with me for good. We both laughed, but deep down, I felt something shift. Like maybe, just maybe, we could move past all the drama and focus on building a real future together. But then, another curveball came flying out of nowhere. Remember Sarah's mom hiring the private investigator, David? Well, turns out, she wasn't just worried about Sarah's mental state. She also uncovered some disturbing stuff about Sarah's past. Stuff neither of us knew about. David showed up at my house one afternoon, holding a thick folder full of documents. Mind if I come in? He asked. Sure, I replied, gesturing toward the couch. What's going on? He handed me the folder. Inside were police reports, hospital records, and witness statements. They painted a picture of Sarah's younger years, a troubled teenager who bounced between foster homes, ran away multiple times, and landed in juvenile detention for stealing cars. There was even mention of a restraining order against her by a former boyfriend. My jaw dropped as I flipped through the pages. None of this explained why she acted the way she did, but it shed light on where some of her issues stemmed from. Growing up unstable can mess anyone up. Why didn't she ever talk about this? I asked David. She probably didn't want to, he replied. People hide their scars for a reason. But knowing this might help you understand where she's coming from, and why she struggles so much. It did. Sort of. Understanding someone's background doesn't excuse their actions, but it does give you perspective. Still, it didn't change the fact that Sarah couldn't provide Jake with the stability he needed. That much was clear. Around the same time, CPS stepped in again. They'd been monitoring Sarah's situation since Jake ran away, and they weren't happy with what they found. Skipping work, neglecting bills, drinking too much, it all added up to one thing: she wasn't fit to care for him right now. They gave her a choice: either voluntarily relinquish custody to me, or risk having Jake placed in foster care. When she called me to discuss it, her voice cracked. Please don't take him away from me, she pleaded. I know I messed up. I know I've hurt him. But I love him. I want to fix this. I believe you love him, I said honestly. But loving someone isn't enough. You have to show it. Be there for him. Give him what he needs. If you can't do that right now, then maybe it's best if he stays with me. She hesitated, then sighed. Okay. Fine. Do what you think is best. A few weeks later, the court officially granted me full custody. No contest. No fight. Just a quiet transfer of responsibility. It wasn't dramatic or emotional, it was practical. Jake deserved stability, and I was ready to give it to him. Of course, that didn't mean everything magically fell into place overnight. Adjusting to single parenthood was hard. Really hard. There were mornings when I overslept and missed the bus. Afternoons when I forgot to pack his lunch. Evenings when we argued over chores or screen time. But through it all, we learned to communicate better. To compromise. To support each other. One night, as we sat eating pizza on the couch, Jake turned to me and said, "You know, Dad, things aren't perfect, but they're good. Better than they used to be." That comment meant more to me than anything else. Hearing him acknowledge the progress we'd made, despite everything, reminded me why I fought so hard for him. Because he deserved better. Because I wanted to prove that families don't have to be perfect, they just have to try. As for Sarah, she eventually moved out of state. Last I heard, she was attending therapy and working part-time at a coffee shop. She called occasionally, mostly to check in on Jake. Their conversations were short but civil. No yelling. No accusations. Just updates about school, sports, and friends. And Mark? He disappeared after the paternity test results came back. Never contacted us again. Honestly, I didn't expect him to. Some people just aren't cut out for fatherhood, and that's okay. Not everyone has to be a hero. Looking back, I realize how far we've come. From that first meeting at the diner to this moment, sitting here typing this update, I see growth, not just in Jake, but in myself too. Life threw me into fatherhood without warning, forced me to navigate impossible situations, and tested my patience beyond measure. But through it all, I discovered something important: being a parent isn't about getting it right every time. It's about showing up, making mistakes, learning from them, and trying again. Jake's almost 15 now. Tall, lanky, and starting to grow facial hair. Sometimes I catch myself staring at him, marveling at how quickly he's grown. Other times, I worry about the challenges ahead: high school, dating, college. But for now, we're taking it one day at a time. Together. Thanks for sticking around for this journey. It's been wild, unpredictable, and downright exhausting at times. But hey, that's life, right?